In 1994, a Japanese electronics giant made a promise to the world that video games would never be the same. 30 years later, that promise has been kept 5 times over. This is the story of the PlayStation. Before PlayStation, Sony was making the chips inside Nintendo's consoles. When that partnership fell apart, Sony didn't walk away. They built their own machine. The original PlayStation launched in Japan in December 1994 and reached the West the following year. It was gray, boxy, and immediately different. Where competitors like Sega and Nintendo were still pushing cartridges, Sony bet everything on CDs. That meant cheaper games, bigger storage, and cinematic soundtracks that cartridges simply couldn't hold. The PS1 introduced the world to a new kind of gaming. Final Fantasy VII told a story so ambitious, it spanned 3 discs. Metal Gear Solid made players feel like they were in a spy thriller. Crash Bandicoot became a mascot for an entire generation. By the time production ended, over 102 million units had been sold. Sony hadn't just entered the console market, they had taken it over. If the PS1 was a revolution, the PlayStation 2 was an empire. Released in 2000, it arrived with a secret weapon, a built-in DVD player. For millions of households, it was the cheapest way to watch DVDs, and it just happened to play games too. The PS2's game library became one of the greatest ever assembled. Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas redefined open-world freedom. Shadow of the Colossus asked what games could be as art. God of War introduced Kratos and his mythological fury. Kingdom Hearts fused Disney and Final Fantasy into something no one had asked for, and everyone loved. Sony kept selling the PS2 all the way until 2013. 13 years on the market. Final lifetime sales, 155 million units. No console before or since has matched that number. The PS2 is not just PlayStation's greatest achievement, it is the greatest selling game console in the history of the medium. The PlayStation 3 arrived in 2006 with enormous ambition and an enormous price tag. At launch, the PS3 cost $599 in the United States. Sony's own executive famously said consumers should get a second job to afford one. It was not a great start. Nintendo's Wii outsold it. Microsoft's Xbox 360 had a head start and better multiplayer. For the first time, PlayStation was losing, but the PS3 had something the competition didn't. A Blu-ray drive. Right at the moment, Blu-ray and HD DVD were fighting to be the future of home video. Sony won that format war, and suddenly the PS3's value proposition changed overnight. Over time, the exclusives arrived. Uncharted brought blockbuster action to the platform. The Last of Us delivered storytelling that rivaled prestige television. By the end, the PS3 had moved 87 million units, a recovery story for the ages. Sony learned from its mistakes. The PlayStation 4, launched in 2013, was a statement of intent. It was developer-friendly, affordably priced, and built around one simple idea. This is a console for gamers. Microsoft stumbled at launch with controversial policies around used games and internet connectivity. Sony stepped on stage, held up a disc, passed it to another person, and said, "This is how you share games on PS4. The crowd erupted. The internet exploded. PlayStation had won the generation before it had even begun. The PS4 era gave us Bloodborne's punishing gothic world, Horizon Zero Dawn's robot dinosaur wilderness, God of War's reinvention as a father and son, Norse saga, and Spider-Man swinging through a lovingly recreated New York. Over 117 million units sold. PlayStation was back on top, and everyone knew it." The PlayStation 5 arrived in November 2020, during a global pandemic, into a supply chain in crisis. You couldn't buy one. Scalpers hoarded them. And yet, people wanted it more than ever. The PS5's defining innovation wasn't the graphics. It was the controller. The DualSense brought haptic feedback and adaptive triggers that made games feel physically different. Pulling a bowstring in Horizon Forbidden West has resistance. Rain in Astro's Playroom taps individual fingers. An ultra-fast SSD eliminated loading screens almost entirely. Games that once took a minute to load now begin in seconds. The PS5 has gone on to surpass 50 million units sold. 5 consoles, 5 eras, 5 different bets on what gaming could become, and 5 times those bets paid off. The PlayStation didn't just survive 30 years of a brutally competitive industry, it shaped it. Whatever comes next, the gray box that launched in 1994 started something that shows no sign of stopping. And for the hundreds of millions of people who grew up with a controller in their hands, that's a very good thing.